Hey guys, couple house cleaning items before we get into the episode today. Kirk and I talked about his book, Sleep to Win, after we stopped recording, so I linked to that in the show notes. If you're interested, just click the link in the episode description. Also, Kirk mentioned something called adrenal fatigue a couple times. This is also referred to as HPA axis dysregulation for you sticklers out there. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Kirk is a super funny guy, obviously a badass. He's a former Navy SEAL, so tons of useful tips in this one. Enjoy it. Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. Today we've got Dr. Kirk Parsley on the show. Kirk is a former Navy SEAL, and he got his medical degree from Bethesda University. Consults with multiple corporations as well as professional athletes and teams. Kirk also lectures worldwide on sleep wellness and hormonal health and is currently completing a book on sleep and health optimization. I'm stoked for that. Doc, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
So before we dig into our topic, can you give folks a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into all this health stuff?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can go on forever about that, but I'll spare you and your audience from having to listen to me forever.
Well, you got a super interesting background, so
yeah.
Please.
So I joined the military right out of high school to become a SEAL, as you mentioned earlier, and then I don't know, like I really liked being a SEAL, but it was obvious that it was a young single man's game, and I was kind of becoming neither at that point. You know, I had a girl I was thinking about, might be the real thing, and I was doing the Clinton administration when it was just, we're just kind of used like police officers and stuff. We're Team America, the world police, and so I primarily did a lot of training, and then we trained other people's special forces and militaries and things. So it just really redundant, and as fun as it was, and as good as the guys were, like, well, I can't be doing this when I'm 60. You got to think of something else. And so I actually got out to be a physical therapist. The girl I was dating at the time was a physical therapist, was in grad school for physical therapy, and I thought I'd want to do that. I've always been interested in musculoskeletal and fitness, and trying to improve my own performance through research. Started working at that clinic and figured out it was a little too limited for me. And but fortunately, we had just about every kind of healthcare provider you could imagine there. And so I got to just see what everybody's jobs were, and I got on good with the doctors, and I got on well with the doctors, and then they kind of talked me into it. And I was like, dude, I'm a high school dropout. There's no way I'm getting into medical school. But, the suckers let me in, and I made it through. And then I was already married. I already had kids. So it was kind of a no-brainer to go to Bethesda, get paid to go to medical school instead of the other way around. And then there's an 8-year commitment. So I knew I'd get back to the SEAL teams. And that's where I spent my last 4 years, was back at the SEAL teams as their physician. And, one, they don't have disease, right? I'm not saying that no SEALs have disease, but the people who were coming to see me didn't have disease. They just weren't performing to the standards they expected of themselves. And they're still really high performing guys by almost anyone's standards, but by their standards, they weren't performing as well as they'd like. And so I just started trying to help them figure that out. And I realized really quickly, that was kind of like my big epiphany aha moment was like, oh, I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm a disease care provider. I don't know anything about health. I mean, the only stuff I knew about health was my self-education, right? So like growing up reading Muscle and Fitness magazine, and then, progressing into like more and more sophisticated, fitness type books and nutrition books. And I'd read all that stuff and I'd done those things, but, I had some certifications and personal training and stuff like that, but I didn't consider myself an expert in health in any regard. And so, that kind of puts you at a point. It's like, well, it was a dichotomy at that point. It's like, well, either I can do what I've been taught how to do, and I will be of no service to my patient population for the next 4 years, or I can do what they need to do, what they need me to do. I can go figure out how to do what they need me to do. But it's all going to be self-education. And so I chose the latter, and I said, well, I'm going to go learn whatever I need to learn to figure out what's going on with these guys. And, being a doctor for the SEALs has its perks, right? And one of the perks is I could call just about any other doctor and say, hey, I read your book, I saw you lecture, watched some of your lectures online, your TED Talk, whatever, and I was wondering if I could come train with you, or, if I could consult on patients with you and just learn from you. I'm really interested in this area. And so they would say, sure, like every time. They'd jump at the chance. And I didn't have a single person say no. And so it just allowed me to ramp up super quickly, and at least the aspect of health and wellness that were important to my audience that we didn't already have expertise in. We already had a nutritionist, we already had a strength and conditioning coach, and exercise physiologist and that stuff. So this was more lifestyle stuff. And then I had the credibility to actually get them to change their lifestyle. Because if you're not a SEAL, SEALs don't think that you know anything about what it's like to be a SEAL, and probably you don't. And so kind of only trust their own. And so most people wouldn't be able to affect change in those guys, because if you're not one of them, they're not going to believe 100% of what you're saying. And, they're just not going to have as much faith in it. So, it was a perfect storm. These guys had all been on Z drugs. About 85% of them were on Z drugs. And, that was the second thing that came to me. The first thing that I thought of was that it was adrenal fatigue. And it made sense. They've been in combat 8 years. But I didn't have great success treating adrenal fatigue. I mean, one, it's hard to treat, but two, I just didn't seem to fit about 70% of the time. Just somewhere a light bulb went off about, I think the 100 guys before you told me they take Ambien too. Let me go back and look at my notes. And so I started going back and looking at my notes and going, oh my God, every single person is on, maybe not a Z drug, but they're all using sleep aids, even if it was just alcohol as their sleep aids. And I honestly didn't know the first damn thing about sleep. Like, I don't have any idea what goes on when you sleep. I mean, I knew what everybody else knows. You take a drug and it helps you go to sleep. Yeah, and so that was the beginning of it, and that's how everything came. That's how my education came, and I got in all sorts of trouble in the military, but I always did before that job, so that was nothing new for me. But I was doing all sorts of stuff that doctors don't do. I was outside of my scope, and but it was successful. I had great success with the guys, and that led to me doing lectures with other thought leaders in the health industry. So guys like Rob Wolf and Dan Party we were talking about earlier, and I'd just be at events where there's half a dozen speakers, and I'd be one of the speakers, and so I got to know those guys and went on Rob's podcast, and that was a really popular podcast, and ended up just running those circles more and more, and the brick and mortar practice just doesn't have the allure that it used to have. And so I did a lot of consulting and just, progressively gone more towards lecturing and information products and one-to-many consulting than the one-on-one consulting. But that's how I got to where I am today. I think that was on we still have 2 more minutes before we're done. So cool.
Well, yeah, man. And you have an amazing background, and you've done so many things up until this point. When you were talking to these guys that are coming into your office, the SEALs, and you've worked with tons of other shift workers as well, what are you seeing these people present with as far as symptoms of the sleep drugs, the sleep debt, the shift work, and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So the SEALs themselves, they came in with, because I'm so creative, I named it the SEAL syndrome. I like alliterations. And so they would come in basically saying that their motivation sucked. Now, again, it's all relative.
Totally.
They still get up early in the morning and bust ass all day, but they don't feel like doing it, but they, as much as they used to feel like doing it.
And these guys are essentially like elite athletes. Yeah.
I mean, they're the most performant people on the planet, probably. I mean, them and astronauts would probably be on par, But I mean, it's just, especially with, this new era of SEALs, the technology, the amount of information they have to know just to do operations is vastly different than when I was training under the post-Vietnam era SEALs, which, basically we put on a floppy hat and, jungle boots and carried machine guns, and that was about the end of our technology. We had a few radios. But, yeah, they come in, their motivation sucks. They say they're emotional, meaning that, they're just emotional at labile. They can get angry really quick. They start crying at Hallmark commercials, and they're just a mess. Like I've never been emotional before. I've never cried before. I've never had problems managing my anger before. Their memory. The funniest thing is the cliche. 80% of the people who would tell me about their memory issues would go, Doc, maybe I'm just getting old, and that's what happens when you get old. Dude, you're 36 years old. That's not old. You're not supposed to have age-associated memory decline at 36. And so, what they would tell me is, hey, I leave my house, I get in my car, start backing out the driveway, I realize I forgot my backpack. And I go get my backpack, and I come back and get in my car, I start backing out again, and I realize I forgot my badge. I go in and get my badge, and they just... 5 times was their average to leave the house. And then when they did leave the house, they usually passed their exit going to work, or half the time past their exit. So they're just really inefficient. And everybody was using kind of the same compensatory techniques. They also complained about body composition shifts. Their performance just wasn't where it used to be. Their focus, their ability to concentrate, pay attention was just gone. And so, that kind of sounds like adrenal fatigue, right? Just don't really feel up to it. And then, like I said, the one day it kind of hit me that every single one of these guys complain that they can't sleep. And when they wake up early, their solution is they're going to go to the gym, work out really hard today, get in like a 3-hour HIIT workout, and then work all day, and then go home that night, and they'll be really sleepy, and they'll fall asleep. I'm like, really? How long have you been trying that? 5 years. I'm like, well, keep going, man. I think tonight's the night.
It's going to work.
It's going to work eventually. Yeah. And, so the one time the guy, I don't know, for whatever reason, the way he said it, I was like, oh, wait a second. This sleep thing, right? So, I would say their symptoms were metabolic syndrome, essentially, like everything you could imagine in metabolic syndrome, along with the emotionality. Interesting thing that I talk about all the time is that if you look at the symptoms of ADHD and you look at the symptoms of chronic sleep deprivation, they're indistinguishable. So think of a metabolic syndrome ADHD man. Like that's kind of what they were. And so then I just started doing the shotgun approach and pulling all these labs, and I didn't have any idea how to even interpret these things against each other, but so I'm just going to check for everything. And they just had the labs of like 85, 75, 80-year-old men.
Wow. So was that displaying as low testosterone?
Yeah. So all anabolics were low, all oxidatives and inflammation was high. Thyroid was always, that's anabolic, but thyroid was almost always off. Insulin sensitivity was usually bad. Leptin, ghrelin were usually off. And then their blood work. For guys who work out as much as they do, like their hemoglobin and hematocrit were really low for that. Their fasting blood glucose and insulin were just terrible for some. For Americans, you'd say, okay, well, that's just a normal adult, meaning a usual adult. But for guys like this, these guys should be way better than even young people, right? So those were all the symptoms, and that's how I kind of ended up figuring it out after a long circuitous path.
So once this light went off and you're kind of said to yourself, oh shit, sleep, I haven't been looking at the sleep piece. How did you start to change these guys' habits? And especially if they're used to taking Ambien, popping that stuff like Skittles, like how did you get them to peel that back?
Right. Yeah. So that was the real challenge, right? First of all, I had to learn something about sleep. So I'm not joking. And I guess because I'm a little older, my idea was to go to textbooks, not the internet. So I went to UCSD's library, and I went through the physiology section up there at the medical school library, and I started pulling out textbooks and looking in the back for sleep, and then I just read whatever they had to say about sleep, which was anywhere from a paragraph to 3 to 4 pages, and then I would just kind of chase that logic train and what did I not understand about what that thing was explaining, and I'd study that, and that would lead to thing. And then you get at higher levels and you start seeing the controversy, and then you start going to articles, and then I found some experts to train with, and so that's kind of how it all unfolded. But I did know that I was going to have to get them off the sleep drugs, because once I learned the first thing about sleep, I found out how important sleep architecture is. It's not just being unconscious for 8 hours that solves your problems. There's actually processes that should be going on when you take sleep drugs that it just doesn't go on the same way. And so I learned about all that. I'd say, well, I got to get these guys off of it. What could be, what's unique about my population that could be explaining this, right? And so that was kind of at the very beginning of the vitamin D3 craze, and maybe a year or two before the craze even hit. And I thought, once I read about that, I'm like, wow, well, obviously, my guys, work at night and they sleep during the day. And even if they do go outside in the day, they're covered from head to toe and, camouflage and body armor and helmets and goggles and gloves. And these guys are all vitamin D3 deficient. And I went back, I already had their labs, it just wasn't one of the ones I paid attention to because I didn't know anything about it yet. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're all low. I'm like, yes, score. Vitamin D3, smartest doctor ever. Everything's gonna love me.
All we got to do is fix the D status.
Yeah. So I give everybody their vitamin D3, and like, yeah, I think I feel a little. I definitely feel a little better. It's not. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, oh, magnesium. It's a cofactor for vitamin. Let's give everybody magnesium. So I started giving people natural calm, and then I just added ingredient by ingredient until I came up with a combination of supplements that these guys, they had to go to 3 different stores in Coronado to buy all these. But I told them the brands. I looked up all the brands that the stores had, and I found the best brands. And I'm like, here's the whole melatonin production pathway, and then we give you a little bit of melatonin, and here's the GABA pathway, and just I had everybody taking all the supplements to do that. And then I get their Ambien. This is one of the things I got in trouble for. I'd get their Ambien converted over to a serum through a compounding pharmacy, which TRICARE won't pay for, so these guys are paying out of their pocket, which is why one of the reasons they're pissed, not the guys, but the medical leadership was pissed off at me. Big surprise. And so it'd be 10 drops would be 10 milligrams. And so I'd say do 10 drops for a week, and 9 drops for a week, and 8 drops for a week, or just 5 days. So 5 days, just keep going down while you're taking all these supplements every night. Because one of the things that happens is their GABA sensitivity goes way down because they're taking these GABA analogs and the Z drugs that act 1,000 times more powerfully. So then it downregulates GABA receptors. Now, when you just put GABA in there, it's not powerful enough. And so it took a while for those receptors to shift, and that's how we worked on it. And as soon as I got guys off, and of course all their estradiol was high. One because of the body composition shift, but also just chronic sleep deprivation leads, or in their case, chaotic sleep, leads to lower testosterone levels, more subcutaneous, more aromatization. And so I started giving them zinc citrate to block that. If they were really severe, I'd give them Arimidex or something for one of the aromatase inhibitors for a couple of months, and then switch them to zinc after that. Started getting them to all take DHEA as a precursor for that. Then I learned about the pregnenolone steal and added pregnenolone in their daytime, and that's just kind of chased it all that way. And then went from purely focusing on sleep to, okay, now that we've got sleep under control, let's focus on your daytime alertness and energy levels. And I mean, I had guys in their 40s who were reporting PRs and their workouts and even training exercises. And then I'd look at their labs, and these guys had the hormones then of 20-year-old men, and it was all supplements and sleep and lifestyle. Like, it was 90% lifestyle, but the supplements helped a little bit. And I was just like, man, I think what I learned in medical school might be bullshit. I was no longer a believer in this pharmaceutical approach, and I'm like, this is way better. And there's guys that are still there. I mean, this was back 2009 when I started doing this. There's guys still operating there that are just able to completely get after it after all this time, because they're focusing on the lifestyle stuff and a few simple supplements and bada bing.
That's really cool, man. And I think that anybody can really identify with leaving the house 5 times, forgetting something, going back, all that sort of stuff. Parents go through that all the time. Young parents with sleep debt and things like that. So how long?
What they really do is walk into the room and go, oh, why did I come in here again?
Totally.
And then walk back out. And, oh, yeah. And by the time they get back in, what was that again? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this stuff is so relevant for just anybody doing shift work, but also, parenting is shift work in itself. So how long did it take you to see, I guess sort of on average, everybody would be different, but reasonable improvements in some of these guys?
So it depended on how far gone they were, right? So the guys who came to see me who were really just performance junkies and wanted to get better, those guys are then like 3 or 4 days, just getting them to focus on their sleep. They come to my office and be, oh my God, like, I can't believe all these colors are here and everything's so bright. And, like, the world is just a completely different place to them. Like, I noticed stuff I've never noticed before. Like, my garden's full of flowers. I've never even seen those before.
Look at all these colors.
Just look at those colors and all this light, and I can focus on something. But the guys who are pretty broken, I had some like really broken guys who, one of my guys got sent home from deployment, and he hadn't slept in 5 days, like at all, a single moment. Although he tried to go to sleep every night, he was sleep depriving himself intentionally. He lay down in bed, he'd lay and stare at the ceiling for 8 hours. We did a sleep study on him, to see what his sleep was like, but also to verify that. And he just laid in bed and stared at the ceiling for 8 hours, or 6.5 hours, however long they did sleep studies. And then I forgot why I was going down that rabbit trail. I think I need more sleep.
Well, that actually leads us perfectly into the next thing I wanted to talk about around the bunker test, because subjective performance is so heavily impacted, performance is so heavily impacted by sleep debt. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, the really interesting thing was, I know what I was going to say about the sleep. That case made me realize how important the TBI was, because he had an RPG go off right next to him, big concussive blow. That's why he couldn't sleep. And then I realized how many TBIs all these guys have. But anyway, right. That's why I started talking about that guy. Tell me your question. I totally lost that one.
The bunker test, the subjective.
Yeah. So the bunker trials are so fascinating to me.
So interesting.
To me, like, that was the paramount work that just made everything else obvious to me. Because one of the big arguments that you get from people is, well, if sleep is so important and it does all this stuff, then how come Joe Blow only sleeps this much and he's such a high achiever? Or how come everybody doesn't already know this? Or, there was just all this resistance to this idea that sleep was a luxury, and everybody knows sleep's a luxury. And as soon as you get really busy, the first thing you give up is sleep. So that wasn't at all a popular message. And then once you read this research about how sleep deprived people, so very quickly I'll cover this. It's a lot like credit card debt, right? It's called sleep debt. So we don't know how long you carry sleep debt around, but it's a lot like credit card debt. You carry it a hell of a lot longer than you should, right? It's not just as simple as missing an hour of sleep tonight and then sleeping an extra hour this weekend. missing that hour might impact the next 4 nights before you get to the weekend. And now you might have a 4-hour debt. And if you don't sleep it off on the weekend, how long do you carry that? Like, we don't really know, but we know it's detrimental. And the sleep debt was a little controversial at the time because it wasn't that well defined. But then when they put people in these bunkers, they were putting them in the bunkers for what we call sleep adaptation, which means they were paying back their sleep debt. And so the way it was set up, 14 hours a day, you go in this cold, dark room that has nothing but a bed and a toilet in it. No lights, like there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. This is before iPhones, obviously. And so the average person would go in there and sleep 12 and a half hours. And then over the course of about 8 weeks, they would all flatten out to sleeping 7.5 hours, plus or minus half an hour. That's where that number comes from. So the number's not controversial. And, recently they've done some studies on hunter-gatherers who've never been exposed to electricity, and guess how long they sleep? So big shocker. Yeah. Would have never thunk it. So anyway, the bunker trials, a couple of fascinating things. One is it made a really hard evidence, or made a really hard argument out of saying anyone needs significantly less than 7.5 hours, because I think similar trials have been done a couple of 100 times at this point. As far as I know, there are no outliers. The outliers don't exist. So either they're being so damn productive they don't have time to be part of research trials, or maybe they don't quite understand things. So that was one fascinating thing. The second fascinating thing is they made the argument, okay, well, now that you're sleep adapted, we're going to call this your baseline. This is going to be your best performance, which, again, controversial, but it's an assumption. And now I'm going to start testing you on something. But when I test you, I'm going to test you sleep adapted, and then I'm going to start taking away your sleep, and then I'm going to see how you perform. And that's the subjective part you're talking about. So we sleep adapted people, then, either taught them a skill or, practice their skill that they already valued. And then say, okay, there's your baseline. Now tonight you only get 6 hours sleep, and then tomorrow you're going to come in and test again. And you come in and test, and they do worse, about 30% worse. But interestingly, when you ask them, how do you think you did? They say, I did worse. I'm tired. And then day 2, they say the same thing. Day 3, they say, but by day 4, they're like, totally adapted. I feel totally normal. And so I always give the metaphor of happy hour, right? You go out, you have a drink. You've had a drink, you have 2 drinks, so I better be cautious about sleeping, about driving home, right? And then you have 4 drinks, and you're like, I can drive, no dramas, right? And I'm cool. So it's that same type of self-awareness. You lose it, and there's been so many other studies that compare intoxication with sleep deprivation. So your performance is on par with somebody who has this blood alcohol level if you've been awake this many hours. And it's really solid. It's reproducible to the nth degree, pretty linear. But it's the same thing. It's like if you sleep 6 hours a night all the time, you don't know how impaired you are. You feel normal. It's just like being 30 pounds overweight is normal now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so relevant for people because essentially that sleep deprived brain, or that, quote unquote drunk brain is making decisions at that point. And it's like, I'm doing fine, man. And it's just the snowball effect. So their inability to accurately look at their performance is super impaired.
Yeah. My, most recent blog I wrote, I think last week, I forget, the title was something like, a drunk, stressed, and depressed CEO, the obvious solution for your business. and I made the argument about executive functioning, right? And I'd actually kind of misunderstood executive function for a long time, or at least I didn't understand the sort of dual definition of it. So there's executive functioning as in my behavior that you can observe, but there's also executive functioning going on in my prefrontal cortex that's actually executively operating and commanding my body, right? So my prefrontal cortex not only gives me the ability to display the behaviors that we call executive functioning. But the CEO of my brain is my prefrontal cortex. It's the CEO of my body, and it's telling my body everything. Like, it's directing just like a CEO. It's making executive decisions. It's marshaling resources here, saving resources here, and that's what your prefrontal cortex is doing all the time. So, when you deprive yourself of sleep, that's the area that's the most affected, is your executive functioning. So you're taking the CEO and you're essentially making them drunk every day and saying, I expect top performance out of you. And then when you don't sleep and you fail yourself a lot because, your memory's gone and it takes you 5 times to leave your house and you never remember why you walked in the room, now you start not trusting yourself, and now you're anxious, and now that anxiety and your sleep deprivation and all these hormone shifts are making you lose your motivation and hope, and now you're depressed. And go ahead and run my company, man. Like, would you hire a guy and say, hey, I'm going to insist that you drink every day on the job? No one would do that, but we all know that companies drive people not to sleep, and organizations all the time drive people not to sleep. It's exactly the same thing. I said the same thing in my TED Talk. If you're about to have surgery and your surgeon does a shot and you're like, whoa, what's going on? It's like, hey, man, don't worry. I never have more than a shot every 2 hours. And for a man my size, I'll never be legally drunk. I never get above a 0.05 blood alcohol level. So don't worry about it. And then you would say, no way, right? No way I'm letting you cut on me. They'd go get the guy who was supposed to be going home, or the gal who's supposed to be going home from her shift, and they'd let that person do your surgery who hadn't slept in 36 hours and was actually on par with a drunk person and was more sober than the guy taking shots.
Totally. And I think a study came out recently that it was exactly that, right? If you're up for 18 hours, you have the equivalent of a 0.05 blood alcohol content.
Yep.
Yeah.
18 hours, and 24 hours is 0.8 to 0.1, or 0.08 to 0.1. So, when I worked at the hospitals, like every other trainee, call every third night. So you're working on patients for 36 hours continuously, and you're drunk and stupid the next day. And you could see it in the behavior. Like, who was on call by who was giggling the most during rounds and who was the most animated with their, you could just spot them. Like, oh, that's the on-call resident right there, because they're like, ah, or they're just can barely move. But if they were kind of normal, you knew they got at least came from a decent night's sleep.
Absolutely, man. So moving on to some over-the-counter stuff, like say somebody's sick, they're feeling a little under the weather. We talked about the Z drugs and the Ambien and things like that. How are over-the-counter meds like Benadryl and things like that impacting sleep? Is it in the same way, to the same degree, or how should we look at that?
So, you have the deep cycles, which are really anabolic. That's when your body's repairing everything. And then you have your REM cycles, and your REM cycles are the opposite of the deep. It's actually a slightly elevated brain frequency over being awake. But we think that's where the emotional categorization is, and the learning, and even muscle, muscle, mirror neurons and your, whatever neuromuscular task that you're training on, that gets solidified. You prune, you make certain pathways more durable. You get rid of some useless information, but you also really, by and large, set up your emotional resiliency and everything for the next day, right? So you're categorizing the emotional things that have happened to you, but you're also changing the concentrations of different neurotransmitters and the blood flow to different regions of your brain to make yourself the best able to handle that next day. So that's a gross oversimplification, but just think of the deep sleep as anabolic, and the REM is primarily neurogenic or neuroanabolic. And what happens is the first half of the night is predominantly deep sleep. The second half of your sleep is predominantly REM sleep. The Z drugs completely wipe out 80% of REM. That's a big schwack. And then anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on the research you see, decrease in deep sleep. Alcohol completely removes deep sleep. There's no deep sleep. It's just like stage 2, which is just kind of like that hovering failing consciousness kind of state where you're not quite asleep, not quite awake. That's where most alcohol-induced sleep is. And then Benadryl, and by and large, all the over-counters are antihistamines. Histamine is one of the wake-promoting neurotransmitters that affects your prefrontal cortex and makes you pay attention to the world. If you can quit paying attention to the world, you can usually go to sleep, because that's what most people's problem are, right? Their mind's racing about the things they have to do tomorrow, or things they're stressed about, or whatever. So by it doesn't even decrease, it just binds to these wake-promoting neurotransmitters, and then those can't bind to the receptors in the brain, and so you don't feel as awake and you fall asleep. But unfortunately, go figure, there's actually a reason why those wake-promoting neurotransmitters need to be there. And so Benadryl gets rid of about 80% deep sleep and about 20% of REM. So kind of the opposite of the Z drugs. And then things like the benzodiazepines, like diazepam and Valium and Xanax, those drugs tend to be kind of the worst of both worlds. So they're interfering with the deep sleep about as much as they're interfering with the REM, and I want to say it's about a 60% decrease of both. So a lot of my SEALs were drinking alcohol with their Ambien, and they're taking, super physiologic doses of Ambien, because if you've ever known a SEAL or a professional athlete, or anyone like of that ilk, if one is good, two is better, three is great. So they're taking 3 times the recommended dosage and chasing that with a few beers or cocktails.
Well, you got to wash it down with something, right?
Yeah, and then they're going, and they're not going to sleep at all. They're getting in their bed, they're falling unconscious, and then all these drugs are wearing off, and then they're waking up at 4:00 in the morning, and they can't go back to sleep because their brain's not even close to being ready to go to sleep. Right? I mean, there's no physiological similarities between what's been going on in their brain for the past 4 hours or 6 hours and sleep. I mean, it's not sleep. It's not even close to sleep. I always tell people in the lectures, like, hey, if this guy here in the front row comes up here and I hit him in the head with a baseball bat and he falls off the stage onto the ground, who would say he fell asleep?
Right.
No, he's unconscious, and that's what Z drugs do. That's what most sleep drugs do. They make you unconscious.
That's a super useful
the
analogy.
vast majority of my patients, doesn't matter if they're entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever, aid groupers, stay-at-home moms, SEALs, firefighters, law enforcement, doctors, nurses that work ER and shifts and all that. I would say at least 70% of them will come back with 99% stage 2 sleep, which means they're just not sleeping. They get 1% sleep.
Wow.
And the whole time they're in bed.
Wow. And then how about when you look at things like marijuana? Is it acting on the same pathways? Is it equally?
No, so the interesting thing, one of the most fascinating things I learned about marijuana, and I actually studied marijuana because it's thought to be a good sleep aid. And so not that the SEALs could take it, but just out of intellectual curiosity, I researched it and tried to figure out what was going on with marijuana. And there's limited research with it, but there is some research that shows pretty normal sleep studies. It probably, of every sleep drug I've seen, it impacts sleep architecture, we call that, the least out of any drug. But it's not doing it through any of those normal pathways. It's actually, the reason cannabis is called cannabis is they actually discovered cannabinoid receptors first. Oh. And then they didn't know what the hell they were or what bound to them. Or, they found some endogenous cannabinoids, but it wasn't anywhere close to being completely understood. And then when they started doing research on marijuana, they found that marijuana, the THC binds these cannabinoid receptors, so they started calling it cannabis.
Interesting.
So kind of backwards the way most things are named. But yeah, I mean, I think it. I'd say probably 50% of the time people say it really helps them sleep. It's really binary. It's like, it's great, or I feel nothing, or it makes me worse. There's very few people who are like, yeah, maybe 20%, but it's like, yeah, killed me, crushed me, I got great sleep, or not much.
Right. So it depends on the person, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So if a shift worker is coming off, say a nurse works 4 on, 4 off or something like that, how do you recommend that they structure their sleep? Do you recommend that they go back to a quote unquote regular sleep cycle right when they come off shift? Or how do you recommend that people sort of navigate that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my approach to, life in general, but definitely my approach to medicine, I try to do everything through education, right? I don't want you to abdicate your health to me, right? If I'm going to be your consultant, all I am is your advisor, right? Like I'm sharing with you what I know in the context of your life, and then giving you some options and saying, you could do this, you could do that, but I'm not going to tell you what to do, because for everyone it's different, right? I mean, if it's a nurse who's 27 years old and she's single and lives alone, I'd say go home and sleep it all off. Like go home and sleep for 20 hours if you can, and then get up and go to work the next day. And then just catch up more every night. But if you have 2 kids at home and you're married and the only time you get to see your kids is in the morning, and you come home from work in the morning, pretty hard for me to convince you to go climb in bed right now and never see your kids again. So, it's different for everybody, but the really short answer, the Reader's Digest sort of rule of thumb is pay that sleep debt back as fast as you possibly can. And then if I get to have any influence over the leadership, which is exceedingly rare, it doesn't matter if it's law enforcement or doctors or SEALs or military or whatever, like very rarely does the leadership buy into any of this. But if they do, I just educate them and say how long it takes to shift your circadian rhythm. So if your shift work is pushing your circadian rhythm, that would be like traveling from east to west. You recover twice as fast as if it's going the other way. So, but it's from east to west. It is every time zone you change. Right. So in America, it's only 3. Right. But if you come from Europe, it could be 7 or 8. Right. In America. So you can count on, if it's 8 time zones, you can count on probably having close to 8 days to recover. It's considered half a day to a day because it kind of ramps up and it gets easier to shift as you get closer. So it ends up being less than half a day and then averaging out. But I just call it a day. Going west to east is the opposite. It's 2 days per hour that you shift. So if you flip to a night shift, you're 12 hours out of phase. So now it's going to take you a minimum of 12 days to actually adapt that and actually to be a responsible, competent, capable employee or whatever you are during that time you're at work. It's going to take you at least 12 days to get there. So why do you go 4 on and 4 off, right? Like 4 days you're doing nights and your circadian alignment never even close. Now you go to days, your circadian rhythm still never close, right? So now you've got the worst of both worlds at that point, right? You've shifted these people 12 hours, given them 4 hours of recovery in one direction, 4 hours of recovery, or 4 days of recovery in the other direction, and they're more messed up than they were before you let them try to repair themselves, right? So, pay it back quickly. I mean, the biggest thing really, I mean, what I tell people all the time, I mean, of course I've been doing this a long time, so I have 1,000 little tools and tricks and tips to like help guide people, but that's like the 10% of the progress, right? Or maybe 20%, maybe we'll call it the 80-20 rule. But usually if I can just convince people how important sleep is, voila, like magic, they get on the interwebs and they can figure out how to get themselves to sleep better. They can figure out sleep hygiene. They can read a few books. They can read a few blogs. It's not that complex. It's just lifestyle.
Absolutely. And how does a conversation like that look for you? How are you that? Because that is really the tough part, right? Getting somebody to really value sleep and being like, yes, it's more important than that next show of, I don't know, Game of Thrones or something, right?
Yeah. So again, like if you sat here and like brought things up, I could give you little bullets for everything. So that example right there is, I say, all right, would you wake up an hour early to watch that? If no, why are you going to stay up an hour late to watch that? It's the same thing, right? If it's a ledger, it's the same hour. Nobody wakes up early to watch Game of Thrones. Lots of people stay up late, right? So that's a self-disciplinary issue, but the self-discipline usually comes with understanding. So if you understand why you're doing something and how important it is, they'll be able to have that discipline. But little tips and tricks like that can help people get through it a little faster, develop the right psychology around it and cement it in and make it more determined and more successful more quickly. But I mean, the conversation really, I mean, the ace in the hole that I have over most doctors and most consultants is that there is not a single area of your life that you care about performing well in that isn't impacted by sleep. So I just interview these people and I get to know what are their values and what are their priorities. And then I can build the narrative to say, this is why you need to sleep, because you value this and this comes from this region of the brain and this is how that's restored. And, just teach them, how important sleep is to their performance, to what they care about. And then once I get them there, like I said, they can figure it out by themselves the vast majority of the time. And if they have little problems, that's when my expertise actually matters. If you say, how do I get somebody on, a lifestyle modification course with sleep regimen? I'm like, I don't. I give people enough information to go do that on their own. I mean, I don't have any motivation to hold people's hands and draw out something from them. There's too many details. I don't know enough about their lives, and I don't have time to learn everything about everybody's lives and do that. So, it's just a big education pot. Whatever you value, I'll make it around that. And I've read enough stuff and done enough lectures and talked to enough people and consulted with enough people now. I can give you really good examples of every single thing that you care about and how your brain is affected by that, or how your how your performance is affected by that. And if we can get your performance better, you want that, right? Okay. And what's really surprising to me about this, and I don't know if you've incurred this, but the least convincing information to everybody is the really hard data that they're going to die 16 years earlier. And that they're, 10 times more likely to get diabetes and 7 times more likely to have Alzheimer's and like all this stuff. And it's like the cigarette smoking, right?
Totally.
So it's like all this, it's going to give you cancer, going to give you cancer, going to give you cancer. When did we get rid of smoking? We got rid of smoking when we made it socially unacceptable. Right. And now once it's socially unacceptable, it's like, oh, no, I don't smoke. I'm not one of those people.
Well, and that's such a great tip, because find out what that person values and then approach it from that angle, right? And that's exactly what coaching is. And so if somebody wants to be a better mom or wants to be better at their job or just wants a better relationship, like approach from that angle and then find out what they value from there.
Yeah, and I mean, aren't we supposed to be having the best time we can possibly have, right?
Totally.
I mean, as far as I know, we don't get a second go around. Like, this is it, man. It's like, why wouldn't you get the most out of every single day that you could? And, to your example, like, why would does Game of Thrones add more value to your life than performing 10% better tomorrow or 15% better tomorrow? And if you're a mom and you're tired all the time, does that extra glass of wine and that extra movie or those 2 extra chapters in your book, is that really where you want to put your energy? No, you want to put it into what you care about is your kids. You don't care how much wine you drink. It's not like you have a journal about bragging about how much wine you drink and how much television you watch. It's like, no, I want to be a really good parent. I want to be empathic. I want to be, emotionally and cognitively and intentionally there for my children. I want to shape their minds and their futures, and I want to be, stable, and I want them, and all of that. Something, I won't go on too far of a tangent with this, but it's some really interesting study. They did couples research, and they sleep deprived or sleep restricted, I should say. So sleep restriction is usually 2 hours. So they assume everybody needs about 8. They let you sleep 6. They sleep restricted one partner in the couple, monogamous couples who had been together for multiple years. And then they just let these people go about their business the next day. Like I think it was at a resort or something, so they could just kind of frolic around. They had no responsibilities. And then they come back that night, and they take them in separate rooms, and they have them evaluate each other. It doesn't matter which one you sleep deprive. They will both say that the other one wasn't quite there, wasn't as attentive as they usually are, didn't communicate as well as you usually do, didn't seem as affectionate, didn't seem as, emotionally, spiritually connected to me, kind of wherever ilk they are in their philosophy of life. But 100% of the time. I mean, how much research is 100% of the time? 100% of the time that happens. All right, that's true. That's as true as anything's ever going to get.
That's a fact right there.
Yeah. Come on. Let's call that one a fact. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
100% of the time it's happened. It's like gravity, right? How many more times does somebody have to jump off this cliff before you believe me?
That's amazing, because it really just alters. It doesn't matter if it's you that's sleep deprived or your partner, your guys' relationship is going to suffer.
Right. And, what's the first thing that happens with kids?
Absolutely.
All right. Right. I mean, you have a double whammy, because now you have their attention split between their spouse, who's supposed to be the most important person in the world to them. Now there's competition there, but now you're also sleep deprived all the time. Both of you are sleep deprived all the time. Average parent loses 6 months of sleep in the first 2 years, which is 25%, which makes sense, right? About 25% sleep loss. That's big. That's a big matzo ball there, man.
Yeah, that's tough to compete with, man.
Yeah.
So as we sort of wrap up here, how does your sleep routine, what have you found works best for you? Because everybody's different. How does your sleep routine look on a daily basis?
Well, for me, I've been I'm really sort of blessed in that area, is that I've always been able to sleep. Actually, I did just about everything I would have the SEALs try. I do myself first, to be able to have an educated opinion on it, but also to be able to explain it to people and what they're likely to experience and all that. And then really just kind of a sanity check as to actually whether it's valuable or not. And so one of the things that I was contemplating on the SEALs was neurofeedback. And there's lots of reasons for that, but that's the only time in my life I've ever had insomnia. I went to this neurofeedback center for 6 days, and I didn't sleep for 6 nights in a row.
Oh my God. That's like a week all over again, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, this is my lesson here, right? So I don't have enough empathy for my patients, because I don't know what it's like to have insomnia. And now I've had a week of insomnia. Like, hell week, I was awake for 6 weeks, but I could have slept any second. If you gave me a second sleep, I'd fall asleep right there. And then, the same thing for me is that when I got out of the SEAL teams and I was all full of vigor, and I was going to go out and like conquer the next chapter of my life. And so, I was grinding in college as hard as SEALs grind to be good at their job, so I outperformed everybody just by working way harder. But to work way harder, since I was already married, had kids, and was working part-time, it meant I was sleep depriving myself. And then medical school, you got to turn the volume up, and I didn't have anywhere to turn the volume up. Like, I was already maxed out. And they're like, yep, you got to, productivity's got to increase 20%, 25%. I'm like, I got no room. Like, I'm at red line right now. And so I sleep deprived myself under the guise of ambition, right? that because that's what you have to do. Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't do it the same way, but that's what I did. But for me, I've never had any problems falling asleep. So for me, it's mainly about the psychology of just understanding the importance of it. And then once I put it at the top of my priority list, which is where I believe it belongs. I think it's the most important thing. It's more important than nutrition and exercise combined. This was something I thought of when I was listening to one of your podcasts. You're busting myths. It's a real recent one. Right? Yeah, you're busting these myths, and it just occurred to me because I knew it was coming on your podcast. I was like, oh, I got to talk to him about that. And I can't remember exactly what you were talking about at that point, but maybe it was early, going to the gym early, waking up. I don't remember what it was, but the only time you get better. Oh, that's what it was. You were talking about, and I was a personal trainer as well, so I know this argument the women come in and say, "Oh, I don't want to get all buffed and muscly." You're like, "Don't worry about it."
Totally.
And that's what you said. That's exactly what I used to say to them. Don't worry about that. I'm like, I've been working out since I was 8. I probably carry 3 more pounds of muscle than I would have if I would have never worked out. Right? It's not going to make a big difference. I can promise you. And your example of, how many millions of men are trying to get more muscular every year to no avail 90% of the time. Right. And unless they're just getting a little bit of a pump, they just have some blood flow going in there. It occurred to me, it's like, what people don't understand, and you were explaining like why you have, and that was another part to it that all kind of led to the same circle you were talking about, why you have, whether or not you should do high reps to get tired or heavy weight and lower reps to get tired. And of course, very accurately say, well, it doesn't matter, right? It's just you're fatigued in the way that you want to get better. But when you're getting better?
While you're sleeping, man.
While you're sleeping, exclusively. That's the only time you're getting better. So it's like, okay, well, you have all these fitness goals. And so you're tearing these muscle fibers down in hopes that they're going to repair more resilient and able to do the type of work that you want to do. And so you're going to go past their work limitations so that they will have to hypertrophy to figure out a way to become more efficient or stronger or bigger, or, more fuel, whatever it is they need to adapt to be able to do that added work. That's how you're going to become more fit, right? Whatever your measure of fitness is, that's how you're going to get better. It only happens while you're asleep. Only 100% of your anabolic activity is happening while you're asleep. That's when your immune system is functioning at its highest. That's when your brain's restoring. That's when everything that makes you better happens while you're sleeping. And we consider that a luxury. That is the definition of insanity. No, eat Cinnabons and walk a mile in your neighborhood every day and sleep 8 hours a night instead of sleeping 5 hours a night and getting up and going to your 4:30 CrossFit class. Guarantee you're going to be in better shape, and you're going to be happier, and you're going to enjoy your life a lot more, and you're going to live longer.
Well, and it's interesting too, as far as sleep being what you're referring to, sleep being more important than nutrition and exercise, and it needs to be in that top spot because it's your nutrition and your training is so impacted. Just the decisions that you make around those two things are so impacted by sleep that those two things are so important as well. But you have to have that sleep in place first because you're just going to be less able to carry out those other activities well, right? Right.
So, I mean, the whole purpose of sleep can be summed up very simplistically. It's not. That's the one nebulous area kind of sleep. It's like, why do we sleep? And what rabbit hole do you want to go down with this one, man? I mean, that's just such a deep question. But why do we sleep? And not philosophically, but physiologically, why do we sleep? Okay, I can sum that up is that while you're sleeping, what your body is doing is preparing you to be the most capable you can be for what you do tomorrow. Why would you give that part up?
Right.
That's the part to keep.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too how you were breaking down the sleep stages. Okay, we repair the body first and then we go to the brain, because if we don't repair our tissues, we literally can't move about the earth.
Right.
So it's like, okay, let's sew up this first and then get the cognitive benefits. And that's where we're sort of struggling, because the cognitive aspects, I guess evolutionarily speaking, we're looking at them, or evolution is looking at them as a little bit less important, still very important, but you need that body repaired first, right?
Right. Because the meat suit to carry around the brain was way more important when you were subject to being prey, and when you had to physically go get your food and you had to go kill your own food and go find your own food. And, the body was super important evolutionarily. Now, obviously, our bodies aren't as important, and you can see that in the way bodies look nowadays on average. But ironically, our brains are so important. That's the first thing to go. I mean, that's the first measurable difference, right? If you sleep 8 hours a night every night for 6 years, and then I make you sleep 6 hours tonight, and then tomorrow I go max deadlift you, it's not going to be that different, right? But if I go test your problem solving skills, your memory abilities, or your attention, and the brain's the most important thing now. I mean, now that everything's about computers and technology and information and more information and more attention, and the two most valuable resources are time and attention. Like,
absolutely,
they're finite. They're finite. You can't build more. It's like there's only so much to go around, and like everything's competing for our attention right now. And so everybody has all their social media, and then their podcasts they're listening to while they're driving and texting, and like everybody's brains are and just trying to get more information, more. And what and then the communication device, the very organ that you're trying to improve is the one you're damaging every night with your choices. It's lunacy.
It is. It seems a little backwards, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, man. Well, Kirk, that was awesome, dude. Thanks so much. If folks want to learn more about you, you got a sleep supplement. Where can folks find all your work?
Yeah, it's DOC, Doc Parsley, like the herb. DocParsley.com.
Okay, so they can find everything.
My supplements on there. Lots of lectures, talks, blogs, information sheets, like whatever.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'll link to that in the show notes. And man, thanks again so much for spending the time with us.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
All right, catch you guys on the next episode.